Hi, I'm Mark Mustian. Welcome back to Furious Fiction. I'm here with Diane Roberts, and we have a great honor today and a great guest, the world-famous poet, and she's just written some short fiction that's won the Iowa Short Fiction Award, Barbara Hamby. So Barbara, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
And we're going to talk a little bit about your fiction book that's out now, and actually ask you to read some from it. And Diane may want to talk a little bit more about that.
Well, I just wanted you to read a little bit because it is so beautifully written, this book. It is so lyrical and elegant and elegiac, to use two E words. And I love the very beginning, so I wonder if you could read that for us.
Sure.
We should say this book is set in Hawaii, right?
Hawaii, where I grew up, and this is a story called Lester Higata's String Theory Paradise, and it takes place in 1999, December 1999. Lester Higata knew his life was about to end when he walked out on the lanai behind his house in Makiki and saw his long-dead father sitting in a lawn chair near the little greenhouse where Lester kept his orchids. A butter-yellow lilia was blooming, its flowers like a scattering of exotic dragonflies taking off in flight. I'll bring it in the house later, Lester thought, for the dining room table or maybe the dresser in the bedroom. On the middle row was a white Paleonopsis he could take to church on Sunday, its bloom cascading over his father's head like a fancy hat. Minoru Higata looked pretty good for someone who'd been dead almost 60 years.
Talk to us about how a poet starts doing fiction. I don't know, you didn't just start, you've been doing fiction for years, but how does a poet shift gears to do fiction?
Well, I'd written both for years. It's just the poetry took off before the fiction did. But I know when I first got serious about this book, I really made an effort to simplify my language, because my poetic language is to say it's language-driven is an underestimation of what I'm trying to do. It's language-driven, it's music-driven, and I know when I read a poet's work, sometimes I feel like the language gets in the way of the story. So I really tried to simplify my language and let the story and the characters shine through.
And how do you go about it mechanically? I mean, are you writing poetry and fiction at the same time? Do you put some down and say, I'm going to take 6 months and just do fiction, or how do you do that?
I do it at the same time. It's crazy. It really is. I don't know why.
And people have no idea how hard this really is to do. And to do it at the same time is really remarkable.
Well, you don't know when something's going to take off. I mean, I know people say all the time, oh, you're so disciplined. It's not a matter of discipline. It's just a matter of plunking yourself down in your chair every day. Sometimes something happens, sometimes nothing happens. More often than not, nothing happens. However, you just never know what's going to take off at a certain time, and so I'm always ready, when that door opens, and you never know if it's fiction or poetry.
Talk to us a little bit about the importance of Hawaii in your work. You were brought up in Hawaii, but you haven't lived there in a long time, right?
I haven't lived there for a long time, and I think I may have another Hawaii book in me that's set in the 60s when I lived there. But this was a book that was really had a lot to do with my mother and my father. A lot of the characters are based on my friends when I was growing up, but then I left in 1970 to go away to college, and so a lot of the characters, Lester especially, is based on their friends. And my parents were both very active in their local church, and so there's a lot of interest in that. They were Baptist, lifelong Baptist, but their church in Hawaii was really quite interesting because most of the people in the church were Japanese, and so they were first-generation Christians, and so culturally they were Buddhist, but they were Baptist, and so it's kind of Buddhist Baptist. It was the weirdest thing. Very unlike
That's
Southern
great.
Baptist.
Yes.
Although they were part of the Southern Baptist
And
convention.
you've got that tension in Lester Higata's 20th century between the strict Buddhism and the sort of tough old Japanese lady that was his mother, and then the sort of the looser American world of his children, which I think is really fascinating, because Hawaii obviously is this crossroads of culture, and you do a great job.
Let's talk about, just in the few minutes we have left, about poetry a little bit, because I loved All Night Lingo Tango. And there's a little bit, having read some of both, there's you can see some of the overlap because there's some religious kind of undertones to some of the poems in All Night Lingo Tango, and just, you know, I mean, did you do them at the same time, or was it, you know?
Oh, sure, I was working on it at the same time.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's one of those things that when I left my parents' house, I thought I will never be interested in religion again, but you have what I call a muscle of belief when you're raised in the church. You can't get rid of it. And plus, I was raised with the King James Bible, which is a beautiful book of poetry. So those are all a part of my work. And you know, I denied it for years, but you know, you might as well, you know, forget about that. You can't deny it if you're going to speak from, I think, your central voice.
Well, and it is quite a wonderful voice that you've given us in this book and in the poetry.
So we're enjoying and pleased to have with us today Barbara Hamby. Thank you so much, Barbara. Barbara, poet and a fiction author, and she has a new book out, Lester Haggatta's 20th Century. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you next time on Furious Fiction.
Bye-bye.